Coming up today on the ROL Show.
And how do we use AI or technology to really connect to the human element, the social skills, that's what they're missing. As the next generation of leaders come in, their native language is technology.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to change that behavior, let's use it, because that's where it's going. You know, look at most people can't even survive without their phones today, right?
On this RL episode, we feature the one and only Rico Peña. He is a dynamic facilitator, bilingual speaker, and certified behavior and body language expert. Rico combines his military training with his business background to bring focus to detail and tactical solutions that always deliver to the bottom line. Let's all welcome Rico Peña.
Right now, we put together a learning management system for leaders, and it really falls into some of the things you're already doing. I work with a lot of executive C-suite and new gen leaders. You know, that's where a lot of our new business is coming from. And as I'm sure you have experienced, a lot of the next generation leaders, even that middle management, never are giving any training. They're promoted because
None.
Yeah. So they're promoted for their efforts, but now they're managing the people who were doing the things they were doing. And so you have a lot of great talent that burns out because they're trying to figure out as they go. So we created a learning management system that falls on understanding yourself as a person and as a leader. And once you do that, how do you understand your team? And once you understand your team, how do you execute it as an exceptional leader? And it's all, my background is behavior, body language, influence, and persuasion. Started in the Marine Corps Special Operations, then brought it into the civilian world, and just spent the last 20 years understanding the human dynamics in the workplace.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Yeah.
No.
And just trying to, the number one, and because of what you do, I'm sure you see this, the number one problem I run into, no matter whether it's I'm dealing with a Fortune 500 global company or the 10 employee startup, is the inability to effectively communicate.
Uh-huh.
And that's where we come in. We take a look at it from a scientific point of view. You know, what is the culture? Who are you hiring? What is the communication style? What is the breakup? You know, all of those things that have to do with the human element, people.
Right.
So we use behaviors, we use emotional quotient, we use, you know, tactics that are being used by the FBI and the CIA on influence, communication, persuasion. I've been trained through all of those.
Wow.
But it's all about, at the end of the day, from a leadership point of view, is how do we elevate your ability to be the great leader that you were expected and have the potential to be? Beyond the imposter syndrome, beyond the lack of confidence and all those other things. And how do we use AI or technology to really connect to the human element, the social skills, that's what they're missing. As the next generation of leaders come in, their native language is technology.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to change that behavior, let's use it, because that's where it's going. You know, look at most people can't even survive without their phones today, right? I know, right? Yeah, and what's funny is when you look at the brain, every time it plays with a phone, is this it releases dopamine. It's almost to the point where you can put a brain of a heroin addict and the brain of an 18-year-old teenager that sees their phones 12, 14 hours a day, and there's no difference in how the brain reacts to that and releases dopamine and reacts to that positive influence. So imagine us as adults. That's why we see parents who their favorite babysitter is the iPad on the restaurant, right?
Yeah.
And that's
we went, my fiance and I, we were at breakfast the other day. The whole family, they're not even talking. They're all literally kids, everybody.
Yeah, my biggest shock of this and what got me down this path is about 8-9 years ago, our entire family, my wife and my family, got together for Thanksgiving. So there's like 14 or 15 cousins together. And the room was absolutely silent. So I'm walking down into the living room, like, what's going on? They're all laying on the floor in a circle, texting each other.
Oh my!
And laughing, and there was not a word at all.
Wow!
And I asked, like, what do you?
That would have been a great YouTube video. Oh man!
I wish I could have.
Viral.
Yeah.
Oh man! Wow.
And even to this day, that's how they communicate with each other. And that got me thinking, these are our future leaders. They're now all in the workforce, and they're all struggling with social connection and social elements. So their ability to move in a career hits a glass ceiling very quickly.
Yeah.
Because in the real world, any job you take, there's some human to human interaction.
Yeah.
And these are outgoing individuals, but they've learned to communicate with other people through technology.
Let me ask you this question. Have you found with all this technology today, people are a lot lonelier? Have you found that?
Yeah. So in my TED Talk, we talk about how initially we look at technology as a way to connect. Look at during a pandemic. Without Zoom, most families, most of the world would have lost connection. And even though there was a lot of challenges, it would have been even worse.
Yeah.
But we became so dependent on that technological interaction that the most reason most people, like in the hospitality industry, hotel industry, manufacturing industry, is that they readjusted their priorities. And now they're more overworked because every Zoom meeting, Zoom behind Zoom and then Slack and text, you're overly connected.
Yeah.
So now we're disconnected because as human beings, our brains, our desire to be tribal hasn't really evolved. We still need that. That's how we learn from ages 1 to 7 how to interact in our environment. How do we are part of a tribe? We're still tribal from our evolutionary standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
So technology, though there's a connection like you and I are talking right now, there's still a missing piece. That body language, that interaction, that sensation of being in the same space, because our brains are picking up tone faster than words, intent faster than communication. But a big percentage of that is our body language. Is that instinct. That's how we've survived for thousands and thousands of years. So technology takes that out, especially written technology. So that's one of the things I want to introduce in the TED Talk is the paradox of technology. How do we use technology to reconnect with our humanity?
It's really good, bro. Really good.
Well, thank you.
That's such a good trigger for me. I hear that word, I'm like, okay, what's next? And something always comes from next.
See, that's from the famous brain of Nicky Miller.
Paradox of technology. So that's your TED Talk? That's the title?
Yeah, I'm still playing with the title, but that's what we're talking about. And exactly some of the stats you're talking about is how technology has created a disconnect and why there's so much mental issues. There's so much other physical and emotional issues. But if we understand, especially next gen leaders, how do we use their native language, that is technology, to improve and enhance their natural ability as a human being?
Interesting point. You're actually the problem you're solving is really trying to have technology get them to connect human beings again, even though with the technology combine it. Okay, very cool.
And I'll give you an example that got sort of this idea started. I have a client, she got promoted to the executive level. She had worked in this organization 15 years, absolutely deserves it, brilliant person. But for the first time, she's in front of 15 C-suite executives, 10 directors, and 25 people of her team presenting her plan for the year.
Wow.
And now anybody is going to be nervous, right?
Yeah.
And every director has to do this, right? It's the annual planning meeting. And her plan was perfect. She's brilliant in the details. But the moment she got up there, because she's never done this before, froze and stuttered.
Oh, no.
Yes. Because no one ever taught her how to do that.
That's true.
None of these things. So it's the
That's
first
so true.
it's the first time that whatever she's about to say affects other people. So we pulled her out and we started working with her some AI tools that you can do your speech, and actually it coaches you. You're too fast
Right.
here. You're too redundant there. Pick up the pace here, right? So confidence comes from these little wins that we get results. That's where confidence is. So as you start seeing, oh, you're improved here, and I call it the 1% improvement. She saw 1% for every little area that she initially was faltering on. She saw a 1% increase. That improved her confidence.
Mm.
When she talked to her team, there's another technology where if everyone has done a behavior assessment, it guides her to, hey, remember, this is a very fast-paced, detailed, bottom-line person, bullet point it before she even starts talking in her emails or conversation. So one of the lines I have in my TED Talk is, unlike all the technology that we are so accustomed to, humans do not come with instruction manuals.
Oh, man. We're volatile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Emotion drives us, experiences drive us, people's opinions drives us. So it affects our ability to connect to somebody else. Or how do I do? We have to stumble through. You know, imagine if when you had your child, they said, congratulations, here's your bundle of joy. And by the way, here's a thumb drive as your child's instruction manual. How to communicate, what's the ideal environment, what to say, what not to say, what their strengths are.
Yeah.
Life would be great.
The Matrix, baby.
Right. So now imagine a leader who's never been doing, has never led, now is managing people, not a product or an outcome, expected to do all these things. And everybody's lives, their livelihoods are dependent on their decisions. So when we went through a week of this, she had to redo her presentation. She blew it out of the water. Because she was
gave her a
feedback.
process. Okay.
Right. But she was getting instant feedback from, we don't expect Siri or Alexa to have an attitude or emotional reaction, right? So she understands what the feedback means, because it's coming from something that she's comfortable with, which is technology, because she's in her 20s. And she is now bringing back, okay, now that makes sense. Okay, I see a 1% here. I see that. And now when she was done by the end of the week, the system was going perfect. So she built that confidence to those results. But now she interacts with her team more effectively. She's gotten a process and instructions on, how do I communicate with Rico? How do I communicate with Reed?
Just her return on her life, just catapulted with everything.
Exactly. Yep.
Communication. So Reed, let's do this, because you're here now. That's phenomenal what you're doing. Because the reason why, because I think it's so funny, because I just did an interview with a gentleman. They do $100 million in sales. They create. They're Home Depot. Everybody they could use you. I just did another interview with. He was the baker for Starbucks. He just sold his business.
Oh wow!
He did $180 million last year in sales. So, but these guys, I'll be able to connect you guys. You know what I mean? And so, which would be really cool. I just did another interview last week in my studio. He has an $80 million trucking company.
Wow.
And what you do is, actually, all these guys need that. The communication as leaders, because as a company expands, your communication skills have to get even better.
Exactly.
Okay? So let's go all the way back, Rico.
Okay.
Let's talk about before the Marine Corps, because I have so much respect for the Marine Corps, right? And so it's like, that's one of my regrets in my life. I didn't actually go in the military, because now I'm a prepper. I'm a full-on prepper. But I don't have a military background, which I would love to have. Right? One of my best friends, Paul Tyra, he was in the Marine Corps, and he actually did Desert Storm. I mean, just the stories. That camaraderie is just so amazing. You know what I mean? And so take me back. Take me back. Like who is Rico? Where did you grow up? Why did you choose the Marine Corps? And how did that, what did you learn from that? Because obviously that transformed who you are today. So talk about that.
So I grew up in Puerto Rico. My father worked for IBM. And that, I think that story is what set the foundation for me, not as just an entrepreneur, but my work ethic. So my father started as a janitor for IBM.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was always forward thinking. So he was a night shift, and there was always analysts there and working, and he would ask them questions and learn, and he would ask to take books home to learn. And so when a job came up, he already had a lot of the knowledge and wisdom and was quickly promoted. And he kept doing this throughout his career. And the CEO of IBM one day noticed this and gave him some books, and he said, you know, when you reach the pinnacle that you want in your career, return these books to me. So my father went from a janitor to the VP of the entire southern region of the United States.
That is crazy.
For when
You hear me typing, I'm taking notes. Okay?
yeah, I hear you. And that's, you know, how we retired. Now, you would think that would be it, but no, not my father. My father retires. He's not the kind of person that sits around. And it was always about being the very best at what you do. If you are a street sweeper, be the very best. If no matter what it is, be the very best. And so he got out and he was angsty, and so he started his own business. So he started a pressure washing and interior plant design business. And one of the biggest lessons he showed me is just show up and show up at your very best. So he would go to these bids like the McDonald's, the Arby's, the Texacos. They need the exterior of the building pressure washed, the lines repainted, and the gas stations with car washes needed the interior of their car wash to be washed and take all that wax out for it to function.
Sure.
So there would be all these open bids. My father would be the only one who'd show up. Right. And they would say, okay, you know, you're new, show us what you got. And he figured out by mistake, especially in the car washes, by combining these two abrasives, that he could spray it and 20 minutes later, all the wax would be gone.
Wow. Okay.
And that would impress his supervisor. And he went from a 1-2 location to he had all of Alabama, Florida, and Georgia for Crystals, for Arby's, for McDonald's, and somebody else in less than a year.
Now, during this time, he was building his career. How was your relationship? Because one of the life funds is the home life fund.
Yeah,
You're investing in your kids,
right?
And so it sounds like your dad was really investing in that fund pretty well. Just look at the results. Were you?
To a degree, yeah. And I'll give you what he told me at age 13. I'm providing you with a home, food, and clothes. Anything else that you want, figure it out.
I love it.
And that's what started my entrepreneurial journey. And I tell the story of my father because that is what laid the foundation for that. So I'm like, okay, so if I want to go out with my friends, most people start with grass cutting, for example.
Yeah.
So went to my neighborhood, started knocking on doors and cutting lawns. Well, my buddies are seeing how much money I was making. They wanted in. I said, okay, I'll sell it. You cut it and you get 30%.
So how old were you at that time?
I was 15 at the time. And that's when I was introduced to the entrepreneurial element. Now, watching my father and my mother ran a restaurant and a bakery. And she was a classically trained chef. I grew up in an entrepreneurial world. So that was my natural life at a younger age. And when we moved to Georgia, that's at 13, when I moved to Georgia because of my father, it opened up a new world for me of opportunities. And all you had to do is go out there. So once I saw that, I'm like, okay, there's something here. So one day I'm washing my dad's car. And I'm thinking, how can I turn something into a business? And I realized that the washing a car, waxing a car, vacuuming a car took time. And this is before car washes. So we're back, in the early 80s. And my best friend and I said, what if we get into like the wealthiest neighborhoods and offer to detail their cars? Right? Okay. And that didn't exist back then. So I had a pickup truck. We put a hose, a vacuum, all our detail stuff, bought a polo shirt, and on the chest it said Prestige Car Care, Excellence in Motion.
Oh, I love it.
We had trifolds, and we started knocking on doors. And about 3 hours in,
you're hustling, baby.
yeah, you know, so we're like 17, 18 in high school, and we are like 3 hours in, and the gen goes, perfect timing. He had a Porsche. I got a wedding to go in 4 hours. Can you detail my car? Absolutely. All we need is a plug and a way to put our hose in. You know, 2.5 hours later, he comes like, this is incredible. This is amazing. We made like $250.
Huge.
I know, back then. And we pack our truck up, and as we're leaving, the next door neighbor across the street saw what we did. And he said, can you come back tomorrow and detail my Lamborghini? Hell yeah. Those two houses ended up with a cul-de-sac. The cul-de-sac ended up with the entire road. And by the end of the summer, we had half of that subdivision.
Well, you know what I see listening to you? You already at a young age, you already saw, you had an eye, already had an eye for what your market was.
Yeah.
You know, which was like, that's
what was missing.
Yeah. So you already had an eye for the right market.
Yeah.
So that's really,
what was the gap in that? And also I would say, let's go figure it out. Let's try it. We may be wrong, but let's at least attempt to see if this is a good idea.
That's awesome, bro. So now let's do this. Let's jump. Why Marine Corps?
So I was watching TV at a very young age. And again, remember, always be the very best is what has been drilled in my head.
Yeah.
So my very first Halloween costume was a Marine Corps uniform because their slogan was the few, the proud.
Yeah. Those commercials are
when I asked my dad, what does that mean? He goes, not everyone is cut out to be a Marine. Only the best of the very best get to make it.
Yeah.
Something sunk into my head that I needed to be that. Don't know what, don't know where. You know, where most teenagers had girls on their walls, I had Marine Corps Recon on my walls. Join ROTC. I was always the best in sports. I was the best in anything physical. So that to me was the challenge.
So you already had clarity at a young age of what you wanted to be. That's really cool, bro. But talk about while you're in the Marine Corps now. So talk about that day you actually signed up.
Oh, I'll tell you the most shocking. The signing up was not a problem. It was more shocking to my parents that as I graduate, I'm at the recruiter, and the next day I'm being shipped out. That's what shocked my parents.
Wait. So you graduated from high school.
Yep. Friday, I'm at the recruiter on Saturday. I'm being shipped out that Wednesday.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we got to definitely go talk about that. Let's talk about that, dude. Whoa, that's like massive action, man. Yeah. Okay, so Friday, Saturday, Wednesday.
Yep. Okay, so the proverbial 2:00 in the morning bus ride, landing on the yellow footsteps, right? You're going through processing. It's a shock because it's 5 hours and no sleep. You get assigned to your platoons, and that's the first time you're sleeping. And you wake up to drill instructors with that, you know, like in the movies with the trash cans, and you're half asleep standing on this line, and these drill instructors barking at you.
Wow.
In that moment,
definitely the movies, right?
Yeah, exactly. In that moment, I'm looking at the ceiling, going, "What the hell have I just done?" The realization hits you, right? And I was talking to a friend of mine. He said, there comes a moment of decision in key points of your life that choice is that fight or flight, but that choice will carry you through any challenge. And in my head, two things hit. Number one, you can't stop the clock. And number two, they can't kill me. So no matter what you throw at me, as long as those two things are true, I can survive anything. And that was the first realization for me as that mental fortitude of being focused on the end goal, but having something that anchors you through it. Because we started out with 45 people in our team and only 18 graduated.
That was like the plumb line.
Yeah. No matter how bad it went, can't stop the clock. At some point in time, they're going to have to stop. And no matter what they do, they're not going to kill me. So bring it.
Let me answer this. Let's talk about because there's research that's actually done, like some of the best CEOs of Fortune 500 companies actually have military background.
Yeah.
Right. And so what are like a couple of superpowers that you learned from being in the military that actually transformed you into not only as a husband, but also as a father and also as a businessman, because, man, we as men, we lead such a lonely life. We don't get any recognition, right? We just do what we do, right? And so one of my buddies always complained to his wife, "You don't even appreciate me," because, dude, that's the world we live in, bro. Just do what you got to do. So what are a couple of superpowers that you saw how it transformed you to who you are today?
Great question.
Like, let's say, like, the audience, like, let's say they're listening, right? And it's like, wow, what, maybe I want to some guy like 18, 19 years old. Because I did a presentation at Camp Pendleton here in San Diego. Oh my gosh.
That's where I was
like, I'm going to cry right now thinking about it. It was amazing, dude. It's like these young men, just like they're literally laid down their lives for the country, and I was treated with such respect that day. I walk in, everyone, sir. You know what I realized? I didn't realize a lot of those guys in there were like in their 30s and 40s. It was like, whoa. That blew me away. So it was a really awesome presentation. And the guy, I don't know what you call it, platoon leader, he actually was retiring in a couple of weeks and getting involved in financial services. It was really cool. So we stayed in contact. What a great day, And so do you kind of see, maybe you haven't really thought about it, what kind of superpowers do you think that kind of molded you?
Yeah.
Kind of leadership?
Well, from a leadership perspective, and by the way, that's where I was based. I was Pendleton, Camp Horno.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I went from Lejeune to Pendleton.
Awesome, man. That's where we surf. We would surf there all the time. Right there.
I know, right? It's a great.
Baby.
That's where we did all that water training with the boats.
Yes.
There's a couple of areas, triggers, I think. And that's why in my training, I start with self. Because there were moments that physically and mentally you're tested. And you start to recognize that you can do so much more than you think if you're willing to get through the storm, get through the chaos. Our very first physical fitness test, I always prided myself, always being in shape, always being the best, always came number one, being pushed to your limit. And the last thing we did was having to climb this 50-foot rope. And I was so exhausted that I got within a 2 foot, meaning that even if I reached up, I could barely hit I couldn't even get to the bell, but my body was exhausted.
Yeah, you're burning.
I was right there, and my body would not move. So I dropped down. Of course, the drill instructor all over me. That stuck in my head. And every day I did pull-ups. Every day I worked out at night because we were going to do that in 30 days, another training. I didn't want to fail again. But because that was my driving motivator, not only did I blew everyone away, I set the course record and I got up that rope and hit the bell. And that to me was a moment of failure isn't failing. It's teaching you what you need to do to excel. So that was the first lesson for me because I was accustomed to winning. I lost, but I didn't let it define me.
Okay, that's really good. Okay, so, as I listen to you, do you have any input too? Reed, just let me know if you want to say something.
It's the first time Reed's hearing a lot of this stuff.
Yeah,
I know. This has been good
forever.
to know a year ago. Yeah, this is good stuff.
So,
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Kalani, if we can steal the recording of this so I can
for sure.
tell some short stories.
Isn't that awesome? And so, because I'm thinking of the audience, like that one person listening, you're like, man, you know what? I want to be an entrepreneur. Do I want to go into the military? And so, because I think they should, and so I'm thinking, because I really, when we do the podcast, there's a theme that I want to just make sure that well, and edify you. That's Rico. The whole goal for the podcast is just edify you to another level, right? And of course, and the whole goal is to get you business, right?
Yeah.
Because here's what I envision. I'm going to start doing live events. And I want to have you guys come, like experts in each life fund, right? And then boom, and so have experts that talk about how they feel that life fund,
Right.
the highest level, right? And so, like what you did, that's part of the humanitarian fund. Like you gave back to the country, which is huge. I don't know if you realize that or not, which is a really big deal, right? And so,
and this is a word that you said. It was a calling. It was. For me, I would have continued done it if certain things didn't happen through political reasons where bases were closed. I would have been there 20, 30 years. I was happiest. There were every day I'd wake up and say, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. Right?
So yeah, because the third fund is the Heart Fund, which is Purpose, Passion, Calling. Read. You were actually following the whole time. Was it? So talk to me. Was it? Obviously, your people struggle with the voice in their head, like "Don't do it, do it." Right? And so, were you? How were you able to really listen to that voice to follow that? Did you have a process? Did you? Right?
So I'll tie two things together. Why was that a calling, and then how that helped me develop into a leadership in the Marine Corps. Growing up in Puerto Rico, I was short. My mom had this propensity to buzzing my hair, and I have big ears, right? And I was also fat. So I was picked on a lot because you gotta, in Puerto Rico, I have green eyes, blonde fro with dark skin. I'm the anomaly, so easy to be picked on. And I wasn't at the time the aggressive person. I always wanted to get along with everyone until one day you finally have enough. And all of a sudden, to me, I it's a trigger for me when someone else is being bullied. So when I got to the United States, my mom saw how out of shape I was and where I was about to go into, right, in an American school. So she put me on a regimen, running every day, different foods, and I blossomed. I got in shape.
Were you 13?
Yeah, 13, 14, yeah.
Okay. And this is in Georgia?
In Georgia, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And so by the end of that summer, I was in good shape. I have great confidence. I saw the difference in how people reacted and everything. And in high school, I joined ROTC because I knew I was going into the Marine Corps. So I wanted to have that initial understanding of military. Yeah. And that's one of my first introductions to leadership, not just because of my skill or my ability or charisma, but because of my fitness. And more often, I set the example by doing, and that naturally attracted everybody else.
What's interesting, because that's actually the second fund is the health fund. By you investing in your health, actually created more of a self-confidence to the point where you actually excel, which is really cool. Okay, cool. And so,
and that's when I realized that I was more focused on my teammates than in myself. So fast forward to the Marine Corps. It's a total different beast when you are in charge of a team. Because if you're on a drilling team in high school and something goes wrong, well, you don't get the trophy. You screw up in the military, someone's in a body bag. The pressure's humongous. But what I carried from that as I'm talking about it now, subconsciously I understand, is that when you asked, one of the superpowers was the understanding that you only thrive and succeed at the speed as your team. If your team is not doing well, you have failed as a leader. So therefore, you always put more into your team. They ate first. They were taken care of first. And my job was to make sure they had everything they need, be the buffer between higher leadership and them, but also protect them.
Beautiful.
They became more important than me.
Beautiful.
And that's what I carry through in leadership. Too many executives assume that title gives them power.
Yeah.
And the one question I asked him said, okay, here's how you don't realize that you work for your team, not the other way around.
Not true.
If today your entire team walks out, quits, what happens to you in your job? Well, I'd probably be fired.
Yeah.
Okay. If you get fired, does it affect them? Well, no. So who works for whom?
Yeah.
Your success and results are dependent on their ability to do their job. You're a people manager. You're not a results supervisor.
So Rico, so much so that's phenomenal. So let's talk about how now, of course, success starts at home. So were you able to also be able to have the leadership with talk about your wife and your kids, your family, the home life fund. And so, it's one of the things as an entrepreneur, it's always tough to the guilt of being at the office and being home and with the kids, right? And so it's because you sound like the super dad, right? I'm sure your kids probably played a lot of sports, right? And so talk about the home life, investing in your spouse and investing in your kids. I mean, for you and the challenge of also building a business and and doing that. So talk about that.
No, I'm not a super dad. My kids did really well. In the beginning, it wasn't easy. This is before anyone understood PTSD. Anyone understood any challenges. So no, it wasn't easy at all. And
this is good. This is good. Yeah. Do you mind if we talk about that?
Yeah, no, not at all.
This can really
any help we can do.
The listener.
Yeah.
Go deep.
I had 3 very successful companies, but I was the asshole you crossed the street to avoid.
Really?
I had the money, I had the fortune, I had the power, but it was either my way or the highway. So when I met my wife and, it was a long dating, we were friends first. We finally get married, I move into the house. I was not the easiest person. And at the time I was working in a corporate scenario. Right. So I understood the corporate branch and I realized quickly that it wasn't for me, but I didn't know that. So I would bring all that home. A lot of arguments, a lot of fights, a lot of back and forth. Finally quit that and finally just understood that I need to be an entrepreneur. I can't work for somebody else. So that's when I wrote my first book. That's when I was introduced to behavior assessments. And it's because of that I now have a relationship with my daughter. I understood what was her instruction manual through technology, through those reports. I understood how to communicate and what I was doing wrong because we would end up in fights, arguments constantly.
You said something so powerful right now. You understand. I don't know if you realize this. You understood her instruction.
Her instruction manual. Yeah. That's where I have an entire speech on that because that's what got me into this industry was how do I fix communicating with my daughter who's at the time in middle school? Because it would always end up in a blowout fight constantly. I'm like, I'm trying to help you. But military, high alpha, driven, you give me a problem, I'm going to solve it. You just need to apply it, right? Obviously that wasn't working. So when I meet a behavioral specialist that gives me these assessments, goes, here's the problem, here's what you need to do, and I do it, and instantly there's a change, that got my attention. And I immediately went to how can we use this in the workplace? But as you had mentioned, entrepreneurship especially is lonely, is challenging, and when you're dealing with imposter syndrome and PTSD, the spouse is what gets the worst. So we embarked, we had a very successful real estate investment company. We had a training company, we were doing really well. 2008 hits. And remember, I'm in real estate investment. And we get hit hard, Kalani, hard. To the point of bankruptcy, 2 weeks from foreclosure. All my toys were repoed, right? And now I'm facing what do we do? What do I do? So my wife is fighting for the house. I used to be a chef, so I go find a job at a restaurant just to be able to pay the bills.
Yeah.
Yeah, you test your relationship, it's right there. That moment. And if it wasn't for my wife, and I've always said this, if it wasn't for my wife, I'd either be dead or in jail. One of the two.
That's
And
amazing.
because of understanding behaviors using the reports, my wife actually got a master's degree in counseling. The joke is just to be able to deal with me, right? But that balance,
Let's get the truth to that.
I'm sure there is. But that balance is what enables to allow us to overcome that, where today we now have a global consulting company.
So good. Wow. It's so interesting what the enemy tries to use to destroy you.
Yeah.
God just takes it, just multiplies you. It's so good, man.
And our relationship is so strong right now. We're a great balance. We're a great team, but it went through that turmoil. And what I work with couples, and Rita and Nikki, also having working spouses. For men in particular, you have to come to the moment in that relationship that you unequivocally say, well, not being with her is not an option. So therefore, what do I need to change to make that true? And for guys, once we have that in our head, like a problem to solve, then you have to make the adjustment of self so you can add value to her.
Rick, it's funny. I think one of your superpowers is finding a solution when there is a challenge.
Yeah.
And so you saw a challenge with your dog, you saw a challenge with your family. So you want to find a solution. How do I understand this to make this better? So I think that's one of the things that maybe you really like military learned. I think from your dad too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Forced you at a young age to go find the answer.
Yep.
Right. And the military, it's fine-tuned you even more. And then you take that. Now that's why your business is succeeding, because now you go to companies and you help them find the solution. Right.
Well, let me add to that. It was because of that situation with my daughter. I think it was the final tuning. Yes, you can want to find the solution to a problem, but you also have to understand that there are people involved. So how do you provide a solution to a problem that is also equitable and collaborative to everybody involved? And that's where communication, behavior, adjusting, empathy, because just because you see a simple solution to a problem, and you can't, as a leader, you can't just say, just do what I tell you to do and we'll get there. You don't get buy-in. There's no trust. There's no respect for that other human being. And you lose the collaborative ability and the genius of a team that has different perspectives and skills and abilities to really accelerate production and performance. Because once they feel comfortable and they feel safe in a team, they will give you 100%. And
I like what you said.
that.
Adjusting empathy. I've never heard that before. That's really good.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
Well, empathy is all about self-regulation. But here's the thing, just like with leadership, no one teaches you how to self-regulate.
So true.
You learn it by trial and error. With technology, with assessments, with even AI, you can quickly understand where you are in the empathy wheel. But it's a skill. What do you need to do to amp it up, lower it down, or improve it, or activate it? What does that mean from your breathing, from your thoughts, the chemical reaction in your brains? All those things create self-regulation. But no one's ever sat down and walked you through that.
You have a process for that.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. So let's envision this. And Reed, if you want to chime in, definitely,
I think I just overwhelmed Reed right
no, this is so good, bro. This is so good. God, I don't even want to edit this, man. It's just so good. Right?
This is the podcast. This is the podcast
as is.
I think we're just good as is. This is phenomenal. So I want you to think, say someone's watching this, right? And I want to talk about being a brand new entrepreneur.
Okay.
I did an interview the other day where they're very successful, but they're in the middle of that challenge with their relationship.
Right.
So let's talk about the entrepreneur just starting with the family. So what's some advice that you wish you knew then,
right,
that you learned now? So what's one thing or two things that you could tell that person, hey, you as an entrepreneur, I know you're struggling with building your family and your company. What's one or two things that you could actually give that person some advice on?
what I would tell myself back then is that your family is your anchor.
So good.
If your family is not the anchor and you're driving for success from money, that's a house of cards. The reason you succeed is because you put family first. Your purpose is your family. If you have a partner or kids, that's what the advice I would have for that. Because then that gives you purpose and a why you do what you do. However, don't allow the drive for success to diminish the quality of life with your family. That's what recharges your batteries. That's what recharges your purpose and your drive. One of the things I always promised with my kids, because my parents were never there for me in my events, is I would never put my kids' important events above a client, a contract, or money. If those clients didn't understand this was important to me, then they were not my clients.
Very good. So you have the ability to already walk away from that, which you really know what you wanted.
Right. Because just as I learned a lot from my father, the good and the bad and the ugly, I understood that I was putting an impression on both my daughter and my son.
So true.
I put myself ahead saying at 30 years old, what am I hoping are the fundamental elements that my son and my daughter need to drive their life?
So good.
What is the example I need to put? And that is always being there for every event, being there for all the important things, the birthdays, not being away. And now they're in their 30s and they're doing a lot of the things I was hoping they would do. They're very successful in their own careers. And now I can do what I want to do, but with the confidence that they have that.
Amen.
For single entrepreneurs, you're going to screw up, you're going to fail, but realize that every step that you do gives you clarity to what you should be doing, what your purpose is, but more importantly, who your true self is. So it's a journey of discovery. And be sincere in why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
I see too many young entrepreneurs right now trying to match the facade of social media and what you should be doing by 20s. It takes time. And this is a journey, and every failure is a step. Everything gets you there. Everyone's here that. But I think is that they're driven by falsehoods instead of what's really important. When my best friend and I decided to do the detail car service, which turned extremely well, it's because we had an idea. We were excited by it. We saw something that fit a void of, hey, we want to make extra money. That was our drive. How do we do that? Right? But we were not naive enough to say, unlike now, you can just start posting things in social media. We had to go door to door. And that was a great experience on how to sell, how to promote yourself, how to take no's.
A great skill set to develop, actually.
Which I'm doing now, right? Every joke is better and better.
Yes.
Exactly. And if I take it back full circle to what we do, we now have the advantage of technology. So entrepreneurs can learn from historical mistakes, can accelerate their success with chat GPTs and AIs and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, if there's not a genuine driving purpose, it's an empty shell. And people can see through it because we're still human beings. We still crave that connection, that genuine interaction, that someone says, I'm doing this because I know it's going to help you. I want to give back. Our motto here at our company is we rise by lifting others. If I walk into a company and we do not improve, we stay there till we do.
So on that note, I'm listening to you. I'm an entrepreneur, right? And I need a coach, or I need you. My company's hitting a plateau. We want to get to another level because how do they get a hold of you to hire you and to work with you?
There are several avenues. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, just Rico Peña, LinkedIn. You can go to www.myproq.com. That walks you through our process. We focus on three things: process, people, and performance through scientific means and the social element. Or you can call me directly, 770-616-8080.
Beautiful. I think I'm just going to keep it like this. Man, this was so raw and so good.
Hey.
Yeah, it was so, what do you think, Reed? It was so good, right? And so,
I mean, that you took us from an earlier point in life that I had ever heard, and so much of what we've kind of worked through together over the last year, it just makes a lot more sense. So I think you've told a complete story. I'm sure you could do this 1,000 times, Rico, but I feel like you probably couldn't do that better if it was more rehearsed. Not that makes sense, right? Like the fact that it was kind of off the cuff, I thought was really good. And Kalani, depending on how the style of your typical podcast episodes, I'm sure with some editing, you can get my ugly face out of it, of course, and then just kind of cut out some of the things here and there that are more procedural. But I really, if this was mine, I'd probably publish it as is.
Yeah, I think I'm going to. And so that note on the ROL Returns on Life show. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for watching. Please watch my other video on the millionaire book publisher who has helped over 400 authors become bestsellers. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Kalani Bailey out.